Okay, we're going to do the election of chair. I wouldn't mind doing it. Is that all right?
Propose you, sure.
Yeah.
I propose Simon as chair.
Is that okay?
Do you need a second? You don't? You can second yourself, surely.
Okay.
Well, I'm happy to second if you don't.
Okay. So no apologies for absence, obviously. Any declarations of interest? No? Okay, so we've got one case here today, which is the Underground Bar in George Street. And we'll start, we'll introduce ourselves first. Yeah, so I'm Councillor San Martino and I'm chairing this subcommittee today.
I'm Councillor James Taylor. I'm one of the councillors here. I council Hayneston Hill Northway.
And I'm Councillor Theodore Jack. I'm the third member of the panel.
I'm Alison Daly. I'm a solicitor and I'm advising the subcommittee this evening.
I'm Hannah Comedy Brown. I'm the clerk for this meeting.
Alex Bloomfield, Alcohol Licensing Officer with Thames Valley Police.
And yourselves?
Sorry, good evening. My name is John Payne. I'm a licensing lawyer representing the applicant.
Hello, my name's Yola and I am the person that's wishing to have Underground Bar. Oh, Charlie's is just here to...
Okay, great. So tonight will be like a discussion. We'll have the report presented. Everybody will be able to have their say and ask each other questions. It's not meant to be adversarial. It's meant to be a discussion. And then at the end, we will ask everybody to leave and we will make a decision tonight, hopefully. That's our intention. So should we start?
Thank you, Chair. This licensing subcommittee hearing is convened to determine an application for a new premises licence in respect of Underground Bar, 29 to 31 George Street, Oxford. The applicant seeks to provide the following licensable activities: live music, Monday to Friday, 1700 to 2300 hours, Saturday and Sunday, 1200 hours to 2300 hours, recording music and sale of alcohol, Monday to Thursday, midday to 0230 hours, Friday and Saturday, midday to 0300 hours, Sunday, midday to 0200 hours. An additional hour for all licensable activities on the day before and day of UK bank holidays is also requested. A copy of the application and the steps the applicant intends to take to promote the licensing objectives can be found at Appendix 1 of the report. The application has attracted representation from Thames Valley Police, which can be found at Appendix 2, and from an interested party, which can be found at Appendix 3. The representations highlight concerns in relation to how the application may fail to promote the licensing objectives of the prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of public nuisance and public safety. It's also noted that the application has attracted a comment in support of the application and a comment suggesting additional security measures. These can be found at Appendix 4. The subcommittee and all other parties at the hearing will note that a map detailing the applicant's premises and the surrounding area is attached to Appendix 5. It is important to note that Oxford City Council had adopted special saturation policies in respect to the city centre and East Oxford as detailed within the Statement of Licensing Policy. The most recent of which was between April 2022, which expired in April 2025. The policy may be reconsidered at a later date, but for the purpose of this meeting, there is no SSP in place. The subcommittee is reminded of its responsibilities under the Crime and Disorder Act and the Human Rights Act when considering the fair balance between the interests of the applicant and the rights of local residents. Any decision taken by the subcommittee must be necessary and proportionate to the objectives being pursued. Members are reminded that whenever they make a decision under the Licensing Act 2003, they have a duty to act with a view of promoting the licensing objectives. When considering any representations, only those issues relating to the 4 licensing objectives should be considered and appropriate weight given to the importance and relevance of each representation. In making its decision, the subcommittee must also have regard to the Home Office statutory guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act and the Council's own Statement of Licensing Policy. Details of these can be found within the body of the report. The subcommittee must take such of the following steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Grant the licence in accordance with the application, modify the conditions of the operating schedule by altering or omitting or adding to them, exclude or restrict from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, or reject the application. The subcommittee may also grant the licence subject to different conditions for different parts of the premises or the different licensable activities. Members should note the applicant or persons making representations have the right to appeal against the decision made by the subcommittee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any questions about the report, James? Clear? So I've got a question. The previous licence that no longer exists, when did that cease? And when also, if that's not the same time, when was it last actually being used? And do we know what the hours for that one? And then nearby, what premises have got licenses sort of beyond 1:30? And I'm thinking, even if they're not in use, because I mean, it used to be a nightclub at the new theatre, and there used to be one in Magdalen Street. Do those still have those licenses still there hanging around, or? Awesome. Have you got any questions about this report? Yeah, just the clarification questions, really.
Chair, no, I'm grateful to the licensing officer for the report. No questions at all.
Any questions from the police? No. On to your turn. Obviously, we've read your application and we appreciate how detailed it is. We're very pleased to see one of that detail. This is your chance to address. Obviously, take note, there were objections from the hotel and there were comments from somebody living opposite. So if you could mind addressing that in your, and also obviously the police's objections.
Yes, of course, that's not a problem at all. If you don't mind, we propose to do this in a two-part session. We're going to go and deal with this in two veins. I'll deal with the legal aspects, if you don't mind, and Yola will explain a little bit about the premises. It's probably helpful for you to appreciate what is being planned here so that you can see that this is different to anything else that is in George Street at the moment. There's a whole different ethos behind this. So, Yola, would you like to go through points that you've got?
Yeah, you'll have to excuse me because I'm incredibly anxious and obviously this is way out of my comfort zone. My hands are literally, so if I sound a bit funny reading this.
You're just normal people as well, so don't worry about that.
But I feel so passionately that the other day I sat with my heart out and I thought it was so important to let you guys know here exactly my true intentions of what I propose that I want to do within Oxford City. And so if you could just hear me out, this is what I've written. And yes, it's from my heart and me. So I have lived in Oxford since my early 20s. My love for going out and enjoying nightlife has given me so much happiness. I've made good friends and it's given me a feeling of acceptance for who I am by socialising with like-minded people. I found this out by my love for music, especially live music. It is such a passion of mine, yet sadly within Oxford City Centre, all the places that gave me such happiness, and I've had the pleasure of seeing some amazing musicians, have all disappeared, which is devastating for myself and Oxford community as a whole. These venues were the Cellar, Purple Turtle, Upstairs at the Wheatsheaf, and the Gloucester Arms, known as the Glock. Although I am now older, it doesn't mean I still don't enjoy the nightlife and going out to see live bands or listening to music that gives me such enjoyment amongst people who I feel the same as I do, and that is so important to my mental health and has helped me in my life so much, which I'm sure so many other people have also benefited as I have, as it provides a sense of belonging, a sense of acceptance, and being part of something which is so important for any individual to feel. I feel so passionately that my city of Oxford now has no offerings of the above for the community, especially its younger patrons who are finding out who they are in the world and experimenting with various genres of music and fashion. There is literally nowhere for what I would describe as alternative, creative individuals to go out to support a live band or express themselves listening to and enjoying their genre of music within a safe and controlled environment with Oxford City Centre, where the so-called norm, or that is what being inflicted on people's norm, by no other offering of an alternative to the clubs, late night venues and chain venues in Oxford that we currently have. I've been a licensee and have run premises within Oxford City Centre for a quarter of a century. I have firmly followed and implemented all of the 4 licensing objectives. This has been proven by the minimum occasions of having to involve the police and the minimum incidents within my premises, which has firmly demonstrated my ability to professionally run a licensed premises whilst upholding, respecting and demonstrating all the 4 licensing objectives and taking a huge care in looking after my customers and the general public. I used to host Oxford's only goth night. It was called Intrusion, which has been running for only 25 years. It is such a wonderful night where people come for the music and they're able to express themselves with their clothing and their makeup with no threat of being ridiculed or made to feel different, regardless of their sexual identity too, which in this day and age is absolutely fantastic, especially with people's poor mental health at an all-time high. This was because our venue enabled the customers to do this in a safe and controlled environment. One of the creators of Intrusion and myself felt so strongly about the fact that there was no other alternative music night in Oxford, and until a later hour, we created and set up Metal Night, which was called Metal, which was all about metal music, where metal music played all night and requests of metal songs were played. It again became such a huge success and gave so many people so much happiness and a sense of belonging. Unfortunately, since the venue I ran had to close, they were left with just a pub with a room above to carry out these fantastic nights and having to close at 11 p.m. due to pub closing hours. This was due to the fact that no other clubs and venues in Oxford that usually would never cater for this genre of music were willing to host them unless it was for a ridiculous amount of money to hire, which completely defeats the object of these fantastic nights. A night which provides its customers with an alternative atmosphere where the customers feel a sense of belonging and a community where they can express themselves freely. With the above taken into account, everything I've mentioned is why I wish to open Underground Bar, Oxford, to provide and give the community a much needed space and premises where it is all about the music until a later hour, which the few clubs, venues in Oxford do not cater for. This is why I wish to be granted the licence of hours I have submitted for Underground Bar. Underground would ultimately offer a safe licensed space for people to enjoy music and social time as opposed to unregulated alternatives, as Oxford City does not at present have venues such as an Underground Bar, which I strongly believe Oxford as a community would benefit from. A 3 a.m. licence allows the bar to cater to patrons who want to socialise later into the night, whereas currently there is nowhere for them to go at a later hour within Oxford City for the specific genre of music we would offer and allow us to host live music and late DJ sets, which helps diversify nightlife beyond traditional or chain venues. Longer trading hours allow staggered customer flow, avoiding crowds and queues, equally allowing customers to pace their drinks. It would contribute to Oxford's cultural diversity and music scene. I believe closing at 3 a.m. would even reduce potential disorder, as by enabling staggered closing times across nearby venues which close at 1:30, 2 a.m., therefore avoiding mass exodus, allowing our management to implement a structural dispersal policy, ensuring patrons are not rushed, which often leads to street drinking or crowd congregation. This will minimise antisocial behaviour, noise complaints, and pressure on transport and local services by having less people on George Street. At the same time, allow us to operate as a much needed destination venue, which is all about the genre of music. Oxford is a home to a diverse and vibrant late night population, including students, academics, local residents and visitors. In cities, a significant proportion of social activity occurs between 10 and 3 a.m. A 3 a.m. licence at Underground is not just about staying open longer. It enables us to serve Oxford's nightlife responsibly, providing a safe, well-managed venue for late night patrons. The Underground is not simply a late night bar club. It is intended to be grassroots alternative music venue supporting local bands, independent music communities and alternative subcultures, which while strictly maintaining the 4 licensing objectives. Thank you.
Chair, I hope that helps set some of the tone of the premises, but just to re-emphasise the point, this premises is intended to be a live music venue. That is the intention of what is planned for this premises. It's not intended as a drinking venue, it's a live music venue. That is in part to try and redress some of the balance which has been lost perhaps over the last 6, 7 years or so, with live music venues no longer being available. Now, hopefully you've seen the additional submissions paper that's been submitted. I can see nods. And that's probably helpful to you to give an impression of what the venue is and what it's planned to be. Clearly at the moment, it's an empty premises. It had a licence, it no longer has one. It is a premises that is in a state of, if I can put this politely, decline. You've seen the photographs of the inside. It is in need of some significant attention, and opening a venue of this nature in that premises is ideal to bring this premises back into use, and indeed, dare I say, to address some of the deterioration which sooner or later will no doubt affect the hotel that's immediately above. And that's one of the concerns that, of course, the hotel should have in its mind when making representations in relation to the premises. So in terms of what's going to be done at this venue to prevent the licensing objectives being undermined, nay, that the licensing objectives are promoted, you have what could be described as a very comprehensive application with a significant number of conditions which you can pick, choose, impose all of those if you were minded to grant a licence. And I'm sure the police will talk to you about their view on the conditions in due course. But I've dealt with licence applications for more years than I care to mention, and this is probably one of the most comprehensive sets of conditions that I've seen for a licensing committee to consider. It is, however, the tip of the iceberg. I make that point. A licence is but one part of the control that's exercised on the premises. And you will have seen in the representations concerns about the street outside. You will have seen concerns about the way that the premises are managed. Well, part of the controls come through licence conditions, but other controls, and very significant controls, come through the contractual arrangements that exist between the premises operator and the SIA team, between the premises operator and the staff. All of those contractual arrangements, whether it be contracts of employment or contracts of engagement, will have penalty clauses, will have very strong measures available to them if, for instance, the SIA team do not manage the premises, do not manage the street, as they are required to do so. So there are additional controls beyond those that are set out in the licence application. Within the premises, there are some advantages that can be had because you will have seen the capacity calculations. You will have seen what went before, and you will have seen the layout, no doubt, with the DJ booth at one end. The plans involve the removal of that dance floor area and the DJ area to make that into a performance area. That in itself reduces the floor space and the number of people that can resort to the premises. That's quite an important point. It brings the premises into a degree of control. Now, I'm conscious that the hotel has suggested a number of things that could cause problems, but indeed could cause problems for any licensed premises. If I could just run through those. The question of noise and disturbance, well, that is addressed very comprehensively in the operating schedule. Clearly, you can see that there's been damage to the ceiling between the underground and the hotel. That will need to be repaired and insulation will need to be installed. That goes without saying. There are proposals to put in sound limiters. So the question of sound transmitting through the structure to the hotel above and disturbing guests is not a viable one in my submission because sound can be controlled through those limiters. Moving in and out of the venue, there is an SIA team that will be on duty, and they will control people leaving and entering the premises. I think the plan is that there will be very limited queuing outside simply because the pavement doesn't facilitate it, and also because of the style of the premises doesn't lead to great long queues of customers as might happen at some other bars and nightclubs. This is a select clientele, I think is probably the best way of putting it, who have a particular interest in this type of music. It's not a broadband appeal to any passerby. So those are some of the controls that are there. Guest safety and wellbeing, I think we deal with through the security staff as well. The impact on the hotel operations, I'm not clear what is exactly being suggested here. But my only anticipation, having dealt with these applications many, many times before, is that of antisocial behaviour, that of noise, that of smoking outside. All of those things are within the operating schedule and adequately addressed in our view. Now, I could go on at great detail, but I am slightly frustrated this evening that I don't need to go on at great detail about the special policy that exists, because it doesn't. Otherwise, I'd be talking to you at great length about cases including Brewdog and East Side Cheese and all those sorts of things and all those sorts of esoteric cases. I will spare you that tonight. But what I will say is that this premises is a premises which should be awarded a licence. It should be awarded a licence as granted because it has the controls in place. It has one other advantage, and the advantage is sitting to my left-hand side. You have somebody here as a small business operator who is passionate about providing live music. Is passionate about providing that live music to our diverse customer base, who want to facilitate, who want to partake of the types of music that are to be put on at the premises. This is not a big premises, a part of a large chain which needs to concentrate on selling as much alcohol as possible to throw down people's necks. This is about a premises that wants to put on live music. Yes, it will sell alcohol to help subsidise and promote that provision of live music, but there is a passion, as you've probably already seen, about providing live music. If you award a licence, I have no doubt that that passion will extend through to making sure that licence conditions are met and that the licensing objectives are met, and indeed that this premises can be an example for Oxford about how to run a premises successfully and properly. Chair, unless there's any questions on what I've presented to you now, I think that probably is sufficient to give you an outline of what is planned, the controls that are in place, and the ambitions for the premises.
James?
Yeah, I have a short question. You said that there's no plans to have long queues outside of the venue. That's very nice, but obviously the queues are usually as long as the amount of people that turn up. So how do you plan to manage this? How do you plan to not have long queues outside the venue?
So there are two things that will prevent long queues. Number one, the capacity of the venue and the style of the premises will not attract long queues, in my view. You've seen some of the images that are put into the supplementary pack. The types of people that will resort to this particular premises have a particular feel about them. They have a particular passion for music as well. That is not the general clientele that come up and down Oxford, up and down George Street. The point is that there are SIA staff on the door, and they will stop queues from forming, and they will basically turn people away if there is an excessive queue, if those queues are interfering with transit of the pavement. So that will be a contractual arrangement with the SIA staff. That will be part of their remit. If they don't comply with that requirement, and they know that there have been problems in the past, and part of that, and indeed on lots of premises, not just this premises, if they do not comply with that contractual arrangement, there are penalties. It is in the SIA staff's interest to make sure they keep that pavement clear and the pavement queues do not form.
Thank you very much. I've a couple of questions. First of all, forgive me if I've missed it, but there are a couple of places in the application where you refer to the capacity limits, but don't actually state what the limit is. So it'd be good if you could let us know what that is.
So my anticipation is that the premises limit could only be somewhere in the region of about 200. However, that is very much subject to the requirements of a fire risk assessment. You'll appreciate that premises that have a licence must do a fire risk assessment. It must be written down. It must be assessed by the fire service. I'm conscious we have got no representations from the fire service on this, but my estimation is that somewhere in the region of about 200 would be as many as you could reasonably get in that particular premises. I suspect that you might actually operate on a much lower level just because of the floor area that's available.
That's very helpful, thank you. The second thing is about the various, the opening times that you've defined and the various times that you've suggested for licensable activities. You have given identical times for recorded music, for sale of alcohol, and for your opening times. You have then subsequently stated in your prose submission that the premises shall be closed of customers, cleared of customers and closed 30 minutes before the conclusion of the last licensed activity, which isn't consistent with that to my eyes. And on top of that, I'd just like to draw your attention to policies LH5 and LH7, which state that licensable activity should normally cease at least 30 minutes before closing time, and that the latest submission times should be at least 1 hour before the cessation of licensable activity. So this isn't a reproach or a criticism in any way. I'd just like some clarity as to what you would intend to happen in practice if you were granted the license.
I think I'm going to have to defer to my left for that.
Yeah, we would stop letting customers in 1 hour prior to us closing. So therefore, if your concerns were that what's to say that people leaving, would rush from other venues because we were the later ones open on that street, they wouldn't, because they would probably be in the other bars at 1:30, 2 o'clock, and 2 o'clock is our cut-off point for letting anybody else into the venue. And if we were to close at 2:30, it'd be 1:30 last entry into the venue. So always 1 hour before we close.
That's not entirely consistent with the policy, because you would have to stop, for example, selling alcohol half an hour before you shut, and an hour before you stop selling alcohol, i.e. an hour and a half before you shut, you would have to stop letting people in. So if you shut at 2:30 in the morning, your last entry would have to be at 1. Again, not a reproach, I'm just, as far as your business model is concerned, and as far as your how you're envisioning the business taking place is concerned, I'm curious to see what effect that might have, or how you feel about it.
I wonder if could I just take instructions just for one moment to clarify your point? 'Cause
Certainly.
it might be helpful.
And then
I'll just say the policy, the way the policy is phrased, says that this should normally be the case. We're very willing to hear arguments as to why that shouldn't apply.
I think this is a common misconception about last hours and the conduct of licensable activities. So I think the intention in preparing the application was, for instance, if I could just pick alcohol, because that's probably the main focus of attention. I've just lost the page. At the moment, Monday to Thursday, as you rightly point out, is 2:30, which coincides with the same time of closing the premises, or the hours open to the public. The intention actually was that sales of alcohol would go on till 2:30, and then from 2:30, people would have 15 minutes to drink up, that dreaded drinking up phrase, and would then leave the premises. I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding in completing the form.
that's
So the intention-
that's
yes.
totally my mistake, and I'm really sorry if I confused you, because
Again, not
how-
criticism, just seeking to understand the
no,
thought
no, I
process.
totally, how I saw it, yeah, is that I just wanted to be granted what a normal
Yeah.
club would be. We put it like that, as I've already said in my statement, that I feel so passionately about what I'm trying to do, and why should we, that sort of venue have to close earlier, etc., to the run of the mill like venues. And I presumed if I said 3:00, we would serve until 3, but we wouldn't let the general public in from 2:00. We would have that hour where no one else could enter, and it would only be the customers that are already in our facilities that could, you know, be there.
So for the sake of formality then, what is essentially sought is that on section 17, I think that's the one, yes, about timings, that there would be 15 minutes, that would be sufficient
Yeah.
drinking up time after sales of alcohol had ceased. So in terms of the times open to the public, when the public can be on the premises, they would be 15 minutes beyond those that are specified in section 17.
That's very helpful, thank you.
No, it's my usual thing, which is that Mr. Payne's very kindly clarified what the applicant is putting before you to make a decision on, which is great. And the policy is there as a policy, and it's not a straitjacket at all. So, but anyway, through the questioning and the communication, it sounds like we have clarity of what you're putting forward for to be determined anyway, so it's fine.
Yes, two final things. The pavement at that part of George Street can't be more than 7 or 8 feet wide. Is it really practicable to have a smoking area there, especially considering the amount of traffic going up and down George Street at that point in the night? And I appreciate that you've been very, very detailed in your submission about how you'll stop, how your SIA registered staff will stop people from venturing out into the road or from getting in the way of pedestrians. But if you've got a capacity of just shy of 200, say, that's still a significant number of people who'll be coming up to smoke, and will you really be able to pen them in that way?
I believe the people that ran Circus consulted the highway patrols within the council, and they had a designated area which was literally with the railings, and I think they were allowed to go where the bus, because there's a massive bus lay-by right in front that obviously stems far from the pavement, and I believe they were allowed some of that area to be so people could be almost contained. The pavement is no way smaller than across the road at the new theatre, where there's 1,200 people or so capacity, that when a show is on, that literally block the whole of the pavement. And that is like at a peak time where you've got people going about their everyday shopping on a Saturday to getting buses, and people are forced to go into the road. Because I like the theatre myself, and I've been in that huge queue that stems right down to the Red Lion. Equally, when they have their intervals, the people that smoke, again, they are on the pavement. And I'd like to believe at the time that we would trade, there'd be much less people on the street at that hour, and the people that were on the street at that hour would literally be seeking late night entertainment and be going to those places. Whereas people just going about their shopping would way be gone home by then. So I feel that there'll be a lot of less foot traffic completely. But as I say, I feel, maybe a bit strongly, because of course we've only got not even a quarter of what the new theatre have got, and no one tells them when their queues are literally like 4x4 across and you literally have to walk into the road. So I think that George Street has its restrictions on traffic as well, which there's not much traffic, which again makes it safer, because I've analysed it because I thought that this may be raised, and I had to look at that. If I want to run a safe venue, I'm not in any, of course I know people are going to want to smoke and vape. That comes with going out, and that goes hand in hand. Of course it does. But I would like to think that, yes, with the council's help and giving me some space, that we can create a much needed, designated smoking area, and then we would probably try and, if that area was crowded in, we wouldn't let it get crowded. Whereas if we would say, look, if if you want to smoke, unfortunately, at the moment that area is busy, and you would have to wait, and that would be strict instructions to the SIA guys, because I'd be passionate about that.
So the application also gives a nod to the way forward with that and talks about
highways and
working
council.
with highways. Now, there is a bit of a chicken and egg situation here. Do we negotiate with Highways Authority to have part of the pavement and have barriers, or have whatever arrangement, or do we go for a licence first? Well, it makes no sense to have those negotiations with highways if we can't get a licence. If we can get a licence, then it makes sense to have those negotiations with highway. And as it's put in the application, as you identified, there is an intent to have an ongoing conversation about that with highways, who have jurisdiction on matters of obstruction of the highway. I have to say, I've had some experience with this. I don't like to mention other authority areas, but in Ealing, we had a similar situation. And what happened there is the Highways Authority agreed barriers for certain times of the day or night, it's actually into the evening. And that is something that really does need to come through a dialogue with the Highways Authority, who haven't made a representation on this particular application, I notice, but is certainly something that is there, does need to be addressed, and would be addressed, as you can see from the proposals.
Thank you. I appreciate your openness. As far as the hotel is concerned, the entrance to the hotel couldn't be any closer. Basically, it's the entrance to the bar. You've given quite a lot of detail about how you'd prevent interference, but I'm just wondering on a physical level, how are you going to have some sort of physical border between the door to the bar and the door to the hotel to stop people kind of congregating?
I've again had to think about this, very much like you're asking me. At first, my SIA guy would be literally stood there between the two doors, because there's literally enough room for a person to stand there. I would again seek to look at the highway, because I don't want to obstruct the pavement without consent. So what would probably be great is if there was, if we were granted a bit, so we could just put, even if it was a tiny petition between us, just to allow them a little bit more privacy whilst entering and exiting in the hotel.
But rightly, that is a matter that would need to be discussed with highways if things are to be put on. It perhaps is a little trite to say this, but of course there's an advantage to the hotel as well, because it gets its own security practically on its door, which it wouldn't have at the moment. So there is actually an added advantage to the hotel from the security that are being provided for the club.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
You got any more questions? I think you say you have 2 SIA staff, maybe 4. Would you like to sort of tell us when that 4 would be, what sort of conditions that would occur? Given that the person in the block of flats opposite has asked for sort of 2 people at the end of the day, that would leave you with nobody inside to disperse somebody. So are you? Tell us a bit more about that.
No, indeed. I'm a firm believer in assessing the need for door staff, depending on the circumstances. Now, it might be that earlier in the evening, 2 door staff are enough, but a sensible condition is that there will be a risk assessment of the need for door staff, and that assessment will take into account advice from the police and from the door staff company themselves. And that assessment will include a calculation of the numbers of door staff that are required. Now, quite clearly, if there were 3 people in the premises, putting 6 door staff on the premises is a ridiculous arrangement. But on the other hand, if it's full to capacity, it might be that 6 door staff are required. So a common condition is that there should be this risk assessment. I think that would be the way forward in dealing with it. That also means that it can be dynamic, so that the premises can react to the situation that it's facing, to the events that it puts on, and make sure that the numbers of door staff are commensurate. And if the police have that input into the assessment and are able to make suggestions, those of course are welcomed and will address the question about numbers.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just wondering how quickly you can react to, you can do risk assessments, but I don't know how available SIA staff are. Would you be happy with us putting a condition, for instance, saying after a certain time there had to be 3 or 4? Is that something you can offer to us even?
I'm just going to, because, yeah, I do feel passionate about it. If we were granted 3 o'clock on the Friday and Saturday, I would have 4 doormen, SIS licensed security. I would have 2 at least 2 on the front, and then 1 that's based downstairs, and then what I would probably call a floating one, and they would all be linked with radios and walkie-talkies. 2 would at least have body worn cameras, and they would be the ones that would be based on the front of the door. But I'd like to think, if we were to say, if we had a band on and that band was a popular band and we even got to a point where we sold tickets, I would then govern how many door staff I would realistically need. I think if you just had like Jemima on her acoustic guitar one evening, I'm not going to need 10 doormen for the people perhaps, that are come there, but it would always be governed by what we were having that evening for entertainment.
So I think you have the answer that Saturdays and Sundays, that there would be a willingness to have additional door staff.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, why would both of the staff with cameras on them be the 2 on the front? Why would there not be any cameras on the staff that are either floating or down underground?
That was the first conditions asked of myself. Of course, I can look into it, and they can all have cameras on. It's something that I could totally look into. I just thought that if there was problematic people on George Street, and we would have a strict door policy of entering, I thought it'd be beneficial for the guys on the front door to have the cameras, body worn cameras. But
I'm sure the police might have a view on this. My view is that having body worn video inside a premises doesn't necessarily always provide a great advantage. What does provide a great advantage is fixed CCTV within the premises. Quite often, if someone is dealing with an incident inside, having close-up footage doesn't really capture anything. It's more important to get a wider view to see what's going on. Thinking all the cases that I've dealt with, internal body-worn video, as I say, the police might have a different view, has only been of use on 2 or 3 occasions. What has been of use has been the wider view CCTV fixed to the premises.
Yeah, I used to work at Sainsbury's, and so I used to have to wear, and I was a manager, so I had to wear one of those body worn cameras all the time. And we were always told that it was never useful in court, but you had to make a point of the fact that you were now recording them, and it would deter them. So my understanding, I don't know if it's the police's understanding, but it's used as a deterrent.
Yeah.
And I've looked here, and I don't think that's my understanding of the use of a body worn camera, and body worn camera on all of the members of staff is that a potential condition?
I can see it's a potential deterrent advantage. The difficulty is that it's a little different to Sainsbury's, if you don't mind me saying so. Just because of the numbers of people in the close proximity, people in Sainsbury's are not often dancing close to each other, and trying to be differentiated on the CCTV. I'm sure that Let me just take instructions.
Okay, Alison's going to make a point.
Hopefully I'll make a point that is helpful, which is that I think in deliberations, you need to consider whether or not body worn cameras on every single door stop, member of the door staff is proportionate to the size of.
You're one step ahead of me. I was coming to that in the moment.
So I think that it's been raised as an issue. I think you've been looking into it. Is sufficient of an answer. It's something we could deliberate if you're happy with that.
I think that there is, that was just about to say that there is merit in having plenty of warning signage that there is CCTV in operation in the premises rather than actually on the individual. So at the entrance to the premises, there's merit in having the obligatory signs. I think that it is a question of cost because these cameras are quite expensive for the reliable ones. I think putting a dummy camera on staff is probably of limited value. If you buy a cheap one, it will go wrong. And so there's no value in it at all. So I think probably it is sensible to make sure that there are cameras available with those at the entrance. It's important to make sure there's CCTV in the premises. It's important to make sure that there's signage, and in terms of proportionality, indeed, that would be enough. But I'm also conscious of what the Information Commissioner has said about providing CCTV, and that actually that should only be done where it's justified. Quite clearly, at this stage, it's probably not justified to go to the extent of everybody having a camera, because where do you end up with, you know, all of the bar staff having cameras? That gets a bit excessive.
May I add something as
yes.
well? Also, we're going to have the ID scanning machine on entrance. So you'll need the pass logo, and that will hold your information. So again, sort of like, and like say somewhere like Sainsbury's, who wouldn't be on track with everyone coming in and out, with Underground, once they're in, we would know who is in the premises. So by watching the CCTV and replaying it, if there was an incident, we'd be able to pick that person out. We'd have their records already. Whereas on the front, the person might not have even entered our premises, and there might be some dispute or something going on. The guys have got the body worn camera because we don't know who they are. If they're kicking off and we're not allowing them in because they're intoxicated. So that's why I felt really that the body worn cameras was, you know, a must on the front and not necessarily within the premises, because we'll have CCTV and the ID scanner on entry.
Having yeah, of course.
Yes, just the one. The objection from the hotel manager, I'd like to read you one of the sentences, because I think it'd be useful to us to have a visualization of what this entails. He says, moreover, as their fire exit passes through our main entrance, patrons at the bar may have access to areas of the hotel intended for accommodation purposes, which could potentially lead to disruptions or even security risks, especially late at night. Reading that, the natural inference is that the fire exit is accessible to anyone at any time. But what's the actual situation? And what's to stop patrons from accessing the hotel in, you know, by any way other than through the front door from the bar?
So the emergency exit towards the rear is past the performance area. One has to go through, I think it's 3 doors.
If I'm correct, because obviously
It's at least 2.
It's two.
It's at least 2.
2 doors.
But the point that I would make is that in terms of licensable activity, these issues are not issues, because that issue would exist whether the premises is being used as a clothes shop or a bar or a restaurant or anything else. However, there is control on those doors. I think when I looked at them, when I went to the premises, what was it, a week ago or something of that nature, I believe that they all have alarms fitted to them. So if the doors open, then an alarm would sound. I think there would be no issue at all with an alarm being put on the door locally so that it sounds if it opens. staff are then alerted to that particular issue. I think the risk of people walking through the emergency exit is somewhat slim. It doesn't make a natural exit out to the premises to the street.
Brilliant, thank you.
Right, I just wanted to come back to the SIA stuff again, sorry. You mentioned about bands, but your bands are going to finish at 11. I go to watch gigs and I would be going home at 11:15 once the band had finished, and you will have a different set of people coming along, and that will be people drinking and dancing, I imagine. I'm just wondering whether there would be a time when you would think after 1 o'clock or whatever, we need more than 2 people. That's going to be the time when you're going to start getting the queues outside, more people going out to smoke, possibly, where you might need 2 people outside, and therefore I'm wondering whether 2 is enough. I'm not saying you have to have, we're not going to suggest you've got to have 4 or 5 or 6 people from 12 o'clock at lunchtime sort of thing. I appreciate you can say you can do a risk assessment, but I don't see how it can be done that quickly. So just like some sort of reassurance about, and obviously I imagine you're not going to be open every night as well. I suspect that'll be the case.
Yeah, we won't be open.
Or maybe you might close at 10 or whatever. Yeah. So is there anything you can do to help us reassure us with that?
Did you want to?
So the point of risk assessment is that it is dynamic to a certain extent. And indeed, if during the course of an evening it looked as if more door staff were going to be required, then the contractual arrangements with the door staff company will need to be such that those staff can be pulled in. But the point is that these risk assessments would be based on experience. I think there is merit, and this is not something that I would suggest needs to go into a licence condition, the premises adopts a generous approach to door staff when it commences trading, so that if it thinks it needs 2 door staff, perhaps it provides 3, and then sees whether that's sufficient. It probably would for most of the evenings for the small capacity, and then reduces those down. But I think in terms of trying to set a number on the door staff, that does have to reflect the numbers in the premises, and that there is of course guidance on door staff, and I think that with a premises of 200 for door staff would normally, of this size, would normally be sufficient, but it might be that there are times when more are needed. So it's hard to give you the reassurance that you seek in terms of us saying to you, yes, we'll put 6 on, we'll put 4 on these sorts of times. It's really important that that remains a dynamic approach with the advice from the security company, who at the end of the day are experts in this, and with the input as well from the police. So I think that's all I can do for you, is give you the reassurance that at the moment there's a plan for 2 during weekdays, 4 during weekends, and if that needs to be bolstered, then it will be bolstered.
Thanks. I think I was trying to find within the application where you'd made mention of there would be a minimum of 2 and probably 4, and that comes under section, you put it in section, I can't go back to it. Section 18, you have to go right through, it's on page 32. So for the committee is that there will be always, whenever the premises is open, there will be a minimum of 2, right? And then you're committing to a risk assessment regularly, dynamic, and
Yep.
You're suggesting that indeed you would be able to find more door staff quickly should the risk arise.
I
My
think-
main question really was just, if we look beyond door staff, how many staff are you anticipating to have in the evening? So if you have 2 door staff, who is actually present in the premises itself? And I think you gave detail about that. There would be, so if I just wondered if you want to speak to the committee
If I can just,
quickly.
yes,
about
if
that.
I can just deal with at all times in the evening and night. There would be little point, I would suggest, in having door staff on at 11 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, midday.
Well,
those sorts
you
of
have
things.
actually put in your application.
I know.
Yes,
As-
so you're just
as-
altering that.
That is put forward as part of the operating schedule. Of course, it is for the committee to decide I'm not going to go into the joys of the Bristol case about interpreting the application and translating it is the word that's used in that to what is appropriate and necessary to promote the licensing objectives. But I think that the committee will no doubt have a mind to that realistic need to provide door staff in the evenings, but not during the day. I'll need to turn to my left about numbers of staff otherwise.
There will always be a DPS, designated premises supervisor, of course, on premises.
I think licence holder, if we can, a personal licence holder, so that you can only have one DPS. So if they go on holiday, they can't go on holiday, can they? Personal licence holder is the meaning there.
I just won't go on holiday.
No, don't put that as a condition, please.
Yeah, please no. And sorry, my brain's just gone
Number
now
of staff.
because I'm on holiday already. No, I'm not. Number of staff, yes, and of course, again, it's all to do with about what we are having that evening. If I would like to think Fridays and Saturdays would be more popular with a more popular band perhaps playing prior, and then, you know, generally as a rule, people do go out more often, so we'd probably have 3 behind the bar at a minimum. And then the door security, and then either be myself or my partner will be around on site at all times, making sure everything's okay. And that's our plan, that either one of us will be there.
So just for clarity, you're saying Fridays and Saturdays, there will always be 4, and are we including bank holidays with that in that thing? From what point, from what time? Just because I don't want to put something on you that you.
Yeah, go, you can say something.
Well, I was just going to say, in the with the aim of a discussion, I'm conscious that the police haven't said anything or entered into the discussion.
They've objected to the whole thing.
I know, but it might be helpful to hear from the police as to what hour they would seek to have door staff on the door before we go in off at 7 o'clock, which we're not going to, by the way.
How long's a piece of string? I mean, it would depend really on realistically what you're looking to do and when that would start from. I mean, on a Friday or a Saturday night, this is why, again, we're a big fan of the risk assessment. It's exceptionally difficult for us to say. I mean, obviously, from our point of view, we would like to see 4 and we'd like to see them starting early doors. But I think
if we were to put a condition, could you suggest us what time we should say would start from on a Friday?
things start to get lively around 8, 9 o'clock at night. Things definitely get a lot livelier at 10 o'clock at night. I would be suggesting about 8, but I mean, I'm coming from a luxury of the police. We would like to see door staff on as soon as it's possible. But I think realistically, you know, sort of that 8, 9 o'clock bracket, just if nothing else, we're not talking necessarily about disorder. The door staff's role is multifaceted, and a lot of it is corralling patrons, stopping people from getting in. So it's not about necessarily going hands-on, it's about the doors are open and managing, you know, access to that premises. It's not necessarily about gripping people up and throwing people out. It's about the customer facing aspect. So the earlier start would be desirable for us.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't ignoring you. That's helpful. I think in terms of making a suggestion, what we were just discussing is that for the purposes of the licence condition, we certainly would be content to have door staff on Friday and Saturday from 9 p.m. The reality would be that a door staff would actually be on the door from the time that the premises open in the evening. So for the purposes of the licence condition, 9 o'clock, but knowing full well that we will probably have door staff before then anyway. What I'm mindful of is that the condition is the long stop. that is the point at which there is potential criminality if that's not done. The police have talked about 8 or 9 o'clock. Quite clearly, we would prefer to have them on at 8 o'clock, and that's probably what we'll do. But in terms of attaching criminality to it, if we don't, 9 o'clock we would suggest is the point.
Thank you. And then just one final question from me. The hotel obviously worrying about the noise. I'm suspecting that the most noise will probably come from your smokers and the people in the queue. If I'm there, I don't smoke, but I'm out there smoking, being noisy, or I'm in the queue waiting impatiently, how can you tell me exactly what your door staff are going to do, your security staff are going to do?
So I think the reality.
I'm keeping hotel residents awake.
No. I think the reality actually is that a lot of the noise will come from the incidental street noise that occurs, and that the sound of people standing outside talking and chatting will probably be no greater than that particular level. But the door staff will have a briefing to make sure that people who are causing antisocial behaviour, who are causing noise and disturbance, if you wish to use the horrible phrase public nuisance, they will be told to go henceforth and depart and to leave the area. The point of having things like club scan, the point of having control over the door is that people can be prevented from re-entering. And the power available to the door staff is to warn people that if they don't moderate their behaviour, they won't be allowed to come in. Now, this is a unique premises within Oxford, is what's being proposed. It's not quite unique in the UK, but I think I can probably count on one hand throughout the UK the number of clubs that are similar to this. That in itself attaches value to what is there. And I think that the risk of being barred from the premises is a big deterrent. It's not going to be a sufficient deterrent for everyone, but it would be a sufficient deterrent for most people to make sure their behaviour is modified. But that is the point of having the security staff outside, so that they can issue those directions, they can ban people on the club scan, and indeed there's a club scanner right inside the door already, which can be recommissioned. So there's a powerful deterrent there.
Okay, I was just going to ask for the licensing team. So in terms of the sort of noise from the music, that's moderated by environmental health. We don't have to consider that, is that right? Sorry, Alison, do you have any more questions?
No, I was just mindful of time. I'm thinking, yes, I was wondering if maybe it was.
Okay, licensing team, do you have any questions? Please. Right, okay, so we move to the police.
Chair, sorry, just before, to remind that we have had your objection in full, so you may, and we've had quite a lot of discussion already, Alex, so if you could keep it succinct, we'd all be extremely grateful.
Thank you, Alison. When we get an application in the city centre or East Oxford, there's two strands to it. There's the consideration usually of cumulative impact. And then if we can get over that hurdle, if a subcommittee is to grant it, the question is, do we think the licensing objectives are being appropriately promoted? Our objection was submitted prior to the decision to not renew the cumulative impacts argument policy. So our objection, if you remove the cumulative impact effect, is somewhat lacking gravitas, shall we say. We did have concerns around the outside area immediately outside the front of the venue in terms of George Street. It is a very small, tight pavement, and we frequently do see issues historically when that location has been operated with pedestrians having to walk out in the road. Mr. Payne is correct. I believe Circus did operate within the bus stop area. I wasn't privy to the Highways Authority giving permission to do that. It's not something we tend to get involved. It did cause us a degree of consternation in terms of road traffic potential. But Circus never really traded long enough for anything to give rise, but it did give us concerns. I know the applicants in the 20 years that I've been in post. Inevitably, there are always issues of crime and disorder where alcohol and the public meet. That's a given. The question is, therefore, what has the venue done to exacerbate the matter or create the problem? And subsequently, what have they done to mitigate it? Now, I've found Yola to be one of these people. I can count on one hand the number of times in those 20 years that I've probably had to go to her and Charlie with issues at their previous venue. When I have, they've been very engaging and very supportive, and they have implemented changes when the authorities have requested them. The operating schedule is indeed very comprehensive. Yola again contacted the authorities prior to submitting an application and sought our views as the sort of conditions we would want. What I see here is basically a carbon copy of that with some additional steps and some further changes. So, for instance, the Challenge 30 policy goes 5 years further to the Challenge 25 that we would look for. So in terms of, if you take cumulative impact out of our concern, the question is, do we have issue with regards to the licensing objectives? There will be issues with the licensed venue over a long enough timeline, that's a given. I think the operating schedule as it stands addresses the sorts of issues that we would look for. I can't think of anything further that would mitigate those concerns. I would perhaps like to see a bit more fine detail in terms of the monitoring of the outside area, the queue management, the smoking and the dispersal. The dispersal itself is dealt with already in the operating schedule in terms of the policies condition, as is the queue management. But I think the smoking area falls between the cracks somewhat. So if there was any comment that the subcommittee were looking for from the police, we would like the smoking area potentially included in the policies. And also the capacity condition that's been put forward. Mr. Payne is correct, that is dealt with through fire regulations. It is not unheard of for alcohol licenses to have capacities where there is a likely impact on crime and disorder, obviously. So perhaps if that condition is going forward, we would like to see a condition attached to that. So obviously from our point of view, our objection now, the cumulative impact's gone, so we can't rely on that. So it's just some minor tweaks from our side of things, really, is what we're left with, Chair.
You're asking for a policy to be written about management of the smoking area. Is that what you're asking in addition?
Yes, within the condition, the policy conditions, one that references the smoking area management would be beneficial, I'd suggest.
Just in regards to the clarity on the conditions of capacity, because there was a condition volunteered in the operating schedule, but it's not got an actual figure. Obviously, it's going far risk. We happy with the 200 for that?
I think that the best way of dealing with this is that capacity could be calculated in accordance with the fire risk assessment.
Yeah. And just again, just confirmation on the last admittance, because again, in the operator schedule, it does originally say half an hour before cessation of licensed activities, but you change that to 1 hour.
1 hour before last submission.
Yeah, the last submission is 1 hour before the
1 hour
Closure.
Can you very briefly sum up? Because we've had a lot.